Welcome to Great Loop Radio, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA, and as you can see, I've got someone else with me here today. This is Michael Martin. If you have been kind of following along, you probably know that we are actively on the loop now. So we are going to do one of our How We Found Our Great Loop Boat segments. So I have cajoled Michael into doing this with me, and we're going to tell the story of how he found his Great Loop boat. We may have shared this before, but he has actually been aboard the Perch since 2017. So I'm the newcomer to the boat. So 2016, thank you. We're officially Looper couple now, correcting each other on just small details of the story. So anyway, so let's talk about the Perch. First of all, why don't you tell us what kind of boat is the Perch?
The Perch is a 2001 Silverton 410 Sport Bridge.
And in layman's terms, really what does Sport Bridge mean? Is that just a model name, or does that describe some of the characteristics of the boat?
To the best of my knowledge, it's just a model name that Silverton put onto the boat. It's a sedan-style boat, which means that most of the accommodations are forward rather than aft. It doesn't have an aft cabin like a lot of typical Looper boats do. It just has the cockpit on the back right into the salon. So
it's kind of an easy boarding boat because we walk right from the dock onto the swim platform into the cockpit and then right on without a whole lot of steps.
Very much so.
So that it's convenient for entering the salon. There are some steps other places because of that. But before we get to that, go ahead and give us some of the Perch's specifications. You mentioned she was a 410, but talk about beam, air draft, water draft, things like that.
She's 41 feet model length, 46 feet length overall. Beam is just over 14 feet. Draft is just under 4 feet at 310. Air draft, I believe last time I measured it was 17.8, or I usually round up air draft to 18 feet, so I've got a little bit extra cushion there. She is powered by two twin Cummins 8.3 liter 450 horsepower diesel gas guzzling engines. Has a 8 kilowatt generator that provides all the power. I think that's pretty much the guts of it.
Yes, and we'll come back to the fuel guzzling engines in a little bit, because that, of course, is a big issue for many right now with fuel prices where they are. But let's talk a little bit more about, thinking back 5 years or 6 years when you decided to buy the Perch. Kind of an unusual situation. You're not a retiree. You were looping solo at that time. And why at that time in your life did you decide it was the right time for you to go out and buy a boat for the Great Loop? Were you already a yacht broker at that point?
Yes, I had already joined Curtis. Joined Curtis in 2013. So I'd been with Curtis for several years. Learned about the Loop prior to joining Curtis, as well as learned a lot more about it, obviously, with his sponsorship of the Great Loop after I joined, but decided very quickly that I wanted to focus on the Great Loop as kind of my niche. I enjoy the people, I enjoy the route, I enjoy just the whole scenario. So in 2016, when I bought the boat, I had been to a couple rendezvous, just like most loopers, going and seeing the rendezvous and doing the rendezvous. In 2014, at one of the rendezvous, I had my mother pass unexpectedly. And then a few months later, I had a motorcycle accident that, out of nowhere pretty much, could have ended my life. And I just decided that, it's time. I've seen people at rendezvous who've missed out on this opportunity, and I didn't want to do that.
Yeah. So not your typical How We Found Our Great Loop boat story, because you were already pretty deep in the thick of things for looping, and decided the time was right for you. So your search was probably then a bit different than most loopers. So how did it work for someone who's a yacht broker who specializes in the Great Loop to go out and find a boat for himself for the Great Loop, also keeping in mind that you knew you were going to have to be working while doing the loop and that you would be looping mostly solo? So lots of different parameters on finding the boat. So how did you go about doing that?
I'd sold a lot of main ships to other loopers, and kind of expected that was going to be the loop boat for me, just because it seemed like a very good boat. But working with other individuals and getting on all different types of boats, aft cabins, motor sailors, catamarans, motor yachts of all different flavors, I could easily see myself being on any one of them. The Perch specifically, a client had asked me to come and look at this boat for him, and I think we did a video. I sent him a video of the boat, and he decided that it wasn't the boat for him, but I felt it was the boat for me. So I made an offer on the boat and got it that way. So.
And of course, she was not called the Perch at that time. And we'll probably, I think, get into why she is now called the Perch. But so what was it about this boat, the Silverton 410 Sport Bridge? Is that what you called it? Sport Bridge, thank you. The Silverton 410 Sport Bridge that made you decide, for someone who's been on many, many boats, what made you say, this is it, this is my looping boat?
A couple things. Primarily, it's a full beam motor yacht, so you have the entire beam of the boat, all 14 foot 3 inches of interior space throughout the whole boat, which really for a 41 foot boat provided a lot of internal living space. Probably one of the key features that I found on this boat that I hadn't seen on a whole lot of other boats, I actually saw just the opposite on most boats, was that most boats had a down galley, where the galley is several steps down from the salon level, and in some cases it's very set off from the rest of the boat. And that was definitely not something that I liked. The main ships that I was looking at had the galley and salon pretty much in the same room, so it was a little bit different. The key feature here on this boat was the galley up, which most of the motor yachts have big forward-facing windows and a big atrium, but when the galley is down, those windows are well above your head, so you can't really see out them. On this boat, when you go up into the galley, you're looking straight out the front windows, and it's a great view.
It is a great view, and that is what has become my office. So I am very fortunate that you chose that galley up configuration, because I get to work there in that atrium kind of area. It's a beautiful view. And in Marathon, I was just staring out at the beautiful water day after day. So really kind of a nice feature. You've mentioned that, of course, the Silverton is a motor yacht where a lot of loopers use trawlers. And I think there's still kind of a thought out there that most loopers are on trawlers. I really don't think that that's the case anymore. I really, particularly kind of looking around at our events, more and more motor yachts are out there. Now, we may see that to start to flip with fuel prices going up, but it's not uncommon to be doing the loop on a motor yacht. But for you, in your job, since it requires you to travel, aside from your looping travels, requires you to travel to preview boats for clients, to take clients to personally inspect boats for surveys. Your days on the loop were much fewer, I guess is a good way to put that, than many. When you were on the boat, you needed to travel fast from point A to point B so that you could work in the afternoons when you got there. And then you needed to stay a little bit ahead of pace so that you could fly out to work and leave the boat for a week at a time, or sometimes more. So your travel was a little bit faster, hence the motor yacht becomes important. Tell us a little bit kind of, the cruising speed of the Silverton, and we mentioned the fuel she uses. So go ahead and kind of give us that information from your first loop.
From my first loop, I was pretty much on plane anywhere I could be on plane. obviously respecting no wake zones and places where you really have to be aware of your wake. And so I didn't, damage anything. But anywhere I could be on plane, I was on plane. And typically I was near wide open, if not wide open. At wide open speed, I was doing 24, 25 knots. And it sounds like it's, so fast, but that's literally only about 25 miles an hour. But at 25 miles an hour, I was burning 34 gallons an hour. So at $4 a gallon of today's fuel, it's very easy to do the math as to how much that would have cost. I tried 8 knots for a tank. I tried 9 knots for a tank. I tried 10 knots for a tank. I went up onto plane and tried 16, 17 knots for a tank. There really wasn't that great of a difference that I was willing to slow down for to save fractions of a $1 per gallon, mile per gallon. Some of my worst days were 0.7 miles to the gallon, and some of my best days were 1 mile to the gallon. So it really wasn't enough to me. If I wanted to get somewhere, cover a lot of ground, get off the water and be able to work or travel, it made sense to me.
Yeah, and those numbers are still mind-boggling to me, mostly because I hear loopers all the time talk about the sweet spot on fuel, and that by slowing down by 2 knots, they cut in half their fuel usage. And I keep trying to understand where that spot is for the perch, and she doesn't seem to have it. We are going slower than you did the first time, so trying to be a little bit more conservative on the fuel burn and still trying to find that sweet spot. But back to that first loop, when you're going around rather quickly, you still did it in the same time frame from start to finish as most loopers, but your travel days were much fewer. We get the question a lot, how much of the loop can you do on plane? And it's a hard question to answer because there are some areas like South Florida where there's lots of no wakes, but then other areas like the rivers where there's not a whole lot out there, and as long as you're not doing damage to the shoreline with your wake, there's no reason you can't go on plane. Could you hazard a guess as to what percentage of the loop overall you were able to be up on plane?
I really couldn't throw a percentage at it or anything. All I can tell you is I was underway for 65 days, and I did on average about 200 gallons a day, which means I was moving most days. I only remember a very few days that were, I think one of them was 14 miles, and I just wanted to die because it was such a short length of time, and it took me all day to go 14 miles. I think that was somewhere in Canada or maybe Lake Erie Canal, but my average days were well over 100 miles. So I was moving most days a good pace for most of the day.
And that point where there was a day where you only went 14 miles, that is the other thing that makes it very hard to predict how much you can be on plane, is you don't ever know what kind of a weight you'll have at locks and sometimes at bridges as well. So I get that question and I kind of go, it's just so hard to answer that. So it probably was not fair that I asked you that question because I know it's not really an answerable question. But then the other thing, somewhat unusual about this boat, about a motor yacht, for somebody who's looping a good bit of the time solo, it's kind of an unusual choice. So share with us your thoughts on that, and let me kind of frame that if you haven't considered how somebody would loop solo. A lot of the smaller tugs are pretty popular because they're just smaller and easier to manage, and a lot of them have doors on both sides, so you can get right from the helm immediately out to handle lines, or at least one side. The Perch is not that way. And just for anyone who has not seen her, from the cockpit, you have to go up 4 or 5 stairs to the flybridge. And then from the flybridge, you have to go down another 2 or 3 to get to the walkways that take you to the bow of the boat. So there are a lot of stairs outside that, as the line handler, you're going up and down a lot of them. So I have often tried to envision how I would do that if I was also the person handling the boat, and I fail to see how that works. You, however, managed to do that. So, what was your thought process when you were considering this boat, and how did you manage to do things like lock through when you were solo?
Well, I didn't consider it when I bought the boat. I liked the boat, so I bought the boat. I figured, I would figure all that out later, and I did. Probably one of the biggest things with looping solo was you had to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and you might as well be thinking of a plan D, because you really do need to plan ahead. You've got to plan for both roles, line handler and captain, so you've got to be able to do both simultaneously in some cases. The Silverton is very unique in the fact that it is all of its walkways are up high. They call them sidewalks. Silverton names them sidewalks, but you basically go out the wings of the flybridge, and you have ramps down to the bow. So the flybridge sits up very high. Looping solo, a lot of the times I was doing things at the midship. Now, I didn't have a midship cleat, but I was handling lines from the midship. Doing things from the midship allowed me to keep the boat tight against a wall or a dock, so that the nose or the stern couldn't wiggle away from me. But what that also did was, if I was in a lock where the bollard was, say, down at normal trawler deck level, I was throwing the line down, trying to get it onto a dock. If I was going to a floating dock, I was trying to loop that midship line around a cleat that was 10, 12 feet below me. So there were some challenges to that, but again, just good planning, being ready. I would always drape lines before going into a marina. If there was somebody who could help, they could grab the lines because I had them all draped. If there was nobody to help, I would be out on them. I'd get it as close as I can, go out to the midship, throw the line around the cleat, and pull us in. Once I had that one line, I could pretty much do anything else I needed to. I could then go to the stern or the bow and get lines done there. But the midship line was the key to me.
Is there any special equipment on the Perch that made any of that easier? There are the dockmate systems that, basically a joystick you can walk around with, bow thruster, stern thruster, any of that helped you along the way?
None of it. No bow thrusters, no stern thrusters. As I tell most of my clients who buy boats with all that stuff, please learn to operate the boat without all that stuff, because they're going to be the first things that fail. Once you know how to run the boat with twin engines, you can put the boat just about anywhere you want. And I can only remember less than a handful of times, 2 or 3 times, that I didn't make my approach on the first try, and I had to go out and do it again, or just reset and try again. But they were very few, because I learned how to manage the boat with what it had. If I would have had bow thrusters, sure, that would have significantly helped. But it's also that key piece of equipment that you rely on and get too complacent with, that when it does fail, or a stick gets jammed, or you overheat it, or whatever the case may be, you still have to know how to run the boat.
Yeah. The other thing that you've mentioned that was helpful, and I want to bring this up because I think it's a lesson to any loopers, whether they're solo or not, is that kind of explaining your situation to lock masters or to dock masters on the way in tended to get them on your side. Tell us a little bit about how you would go about that, and how that worked with lock masters in particular, when you communicated to them that you were solo and here's what you would like to do as you're coming in.
In some cases, they can't do a whole lot to help you, like with a floating bollard. They really can't tell you other than, it's a floating bollard, so you know what to be aware for. In some cases where they have to throw you a line or something along those lines, it was helpful that they knew that I was single-handed. I could just walk right off the bridge to the side deck and grab a line that they threw down and, tie it off to my handrails just to keep me secure for a few minutes. But it was very helpful to let them know, especially in marinas, that I was single-handed, because they'd bring out an extra hand. They'd bring out 2 dock hands instead of just one, because they knew I wasn't necessarily going to be throwing lines because I was behind the wheel. So, and again, that goes back to planning and draping the lines. I draped a bow line, a midship, and an aft line every time. Had fenders ready if I knew where I was going, and that they could just grab those very easily.
Yeah, and for new loopers, I think that just goes to prove that dock masters, lock masters, they're really on your side. And if you tell them, for the most part, if you tell them, hey, I'm kind of new to this, or I haven't really done a lot of docking in this kind of current before, they're going to get you some extra help out there. So I think it's important that, just be upfront about your skill level and your comfort level. So I want to talk a little bit more about the configuration of the perch and why you chose her and how she works for you. And I think some of y'all can probably hear some background noise. That would be Margot right now. Margot is Michael's umbrella cockatoo. So yes, there is a bird aboard, hence the name The Perch. That all starts to make sense for people now. But you knew from the start that Margot was going to be your looping companion. So tell us how that factored into your decision on the Silverton 410.
Boarding the Silverton 410 for the first time, right away it became obvious to me where I could put Margot's cage. On a lot of boats, that was not the case. The main ship really didn't have a great place for Margot's cage. Unless I got up into some of the much bigger boats, there just wasn't the room. On the Perch, there was a recliner and a small bar with 2 bar stools that I really pretty much figured I would never use. So I rotated the chair 90 degrees and put the bar stools in storage, and it made the perfect place for Margot to sit. She has a beautiful side view window that she looks out, and she's looked out that window now for 8,000 or 9,000 miles and watched the world go by. So she seems to enjoy it. And, they're not like dogs and cats where they'll just curl up anywhere. They really have to have a dedicated cage, and her cage is substantial.
Yes, it is substantial. But so the salon is sizable. As you mentioned, it's the full beam of the boat, and that's what gives Margot her space. And that's something we tell a lot of loopers who are looking for their boat is, consider what and who you need to bring with you and the space that requires. We've had people with hobbies like weaving looms that needed a space, and people, with special pet requirements. So that made a difference for you. You talked about the galley up. Kind of walk us through the rest of the interior of the Perch. What other features does she have?
One of the other things that I really like about the Perch is that the accommodations are all underneath the galley and forward. When sitting in the salon like we are tonight, there's just a small walkway off to the starboard side that just slips away and goes down, and it's only a couple of steps, so it's nothing that you have to go up or down a whole ton of steps. The only big amount of steps is on the fly bridge. So interior wise, it's very easy to move around. As you go down that walkway, you've got the head and vanity in one room on the starboard side. Across from that is the second spare bedroom or storage room for us people who don't have a lot of visitors. And then the master is in the bow. Between the master and the guest stateroom, there's another small room that houses the shower. So that can be accessed from either of the 2 rooms. So that while it is a one-head boat in all config, in the way you say the boat, talk about the boat, this fact that those 2 pieces are split up almost makes it like 2 heads, where somebody can be showering and somebody can be in the head doing whatever they need to be doing. So it really does give you the ability to use both spaces at the same time, rather than a head that has a shower stall in it.
Right. And I think our circumstances have been a little bit different with storage space, because I moved on to a boat that was already full. So it wasn't a matter of a couple buying a boat and moving all their stuff on it together. And you've been very kind and generous with making some space for my stuff. But the Silverton really does have a lot of space, and I think a lot of boats have this, but the full queen walk-around berth does have full storage underneath that bed. So there's plenty of drawer space, plenty of locker space. It really does swallow up a lot of shoes and other items that I may or may not have brought aboard with me. But we've got some creative storage, some things that you built in that I think we'll cover in another video at some point, and just kind of show some of that handiwork and some of the things that you can add if you're looking to create some more space. Are there any features of the perch that we've kind of missed talking about?
Probably the only two things that we haven't talked about is engine room access, which is through the sole here in the salon. There's two hatches. There's one that's kind of an everyday hatch that you can go up and down and just do your daily checks, and then you can remove both hatches if you really need to get in there and get serious. The other thing is I call it the basement, but it's the lazarette of the boat, and it's in the cockpit, obviously. When you open the hatch, it's kind of deceiving because there's a tray in there that you can lift out, and most people just wouldn't even realize that that there's something more to that. But once you lift the tray out, you can actually drop down into the stern of the boat 4 or 5 feet, and that's where the holding tank is, fuel tank, retractable power line, all the steerage, all that kind of stuff, and a good amount of storage.
Yeah, it really is pretty cavernous down there. In fact, we keep a dock cart in there, and it also fits 2 Adirondack style folding chairs and a table, and there's a little stepladder down there. I was in there today and I was like, wow, I didn't realize we had stuffed all of this down there. So that is very spacious, the basement. And I call the garage the compartment on the back where we keep the spare electrical cord and hoses. So lots of storage space, lots of windows here in the salon and in the galley. From my perspective, the thing that I would change is it's a great boat for the two of us, and it's fine when we have guests, which we have had a couple of times, up to 2 guests, for a few days. It's not a great entertaining boat for just having a couple of people over for cocktails or dinner.
Margo kind of ruins it.
A little bit. But the nice thing I think I learned pretty quickly is that some of the people with the larger boats, or even the boats that are the same size but configured differently, are usually more than happy to host those things. So that was always nice, and it actually works out okay. I am a big, as you know, a big HGTV watcher, so I get in here all the time. It's a 2001 boat. So she's 20 years old at this point, and there's certainly... I go into some other boats that have done some extensive remodeling, and I think some of them that I'm talking about, and it makes me want to come in here and start, the black sinks are kind of outdated. Let's redo that. And then I settle down and realize that she's just fine the way she is, and who knows what's next for us after this loop. There may be a different boat in our future. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to start doing extensive cosmetic remodels when she's really just fine. And I think I've said it before, but there's the saying that it's better to have friends with boats than to actually have a boat. And I had the good fortune to be able to walk into this boat, and you've been kind enough to let me make it my own, although there still are not enough throw pillows on the boat. That's going to be our point of contention. But she works for us. And I think that's the other kind of looper adage is sometimes the best boat is the boat you have. And, this is ideal for what we're doing along with Margo. Do you want to bring Margo over? Sure. There was a time when if the two of us sat this close together on the sofa here, Margo would crawl across the floor and come running over because she is a little bit possessive of Michael. So here she is. She's kind of blending into your shirt.
Say hi. Say hi.
So that's Margo. That is our third crew.
She doesn't realize she's on camera. She probably can't even really make herself aware that she's seeing herself.
She's waving. But any other thoughts, comments, particularly as somebody who sees a whole lot of looper boats, any other thoughts about the Silverton, what makes her a great looping boat, or what might make her not perfect for some people?
Not specifically. a lot of loopers obviously like the aft cabins. They like the separation of guest and master stateroom at either end of the boat. So the sedan version of the motor yacht doesn't seem to be as popular, and Silverton doesn't seem to be as popular. I've seen a few of them out here on the loop, but for the most part, they're just not a very popular boat. And they do have an aft cabin version, just doesn't seem to be that popular. The main ships are a very similar sedan, and they are very popular. So it's really a mix. I think most of the main ship owners are really doing it as a couple. So they don't mind the fact that the master is in the bow, and that they have a separation of the two staterooms or not, because they're just doing it by themselves. So, sorry, bird attack. But no, this boat works for loopers. It should work for loopers. There's really no reason why it can't. Obviously, I've done my loop, and we're doing it again. So I think it's a good boat. I think it's built well. It's certainly not a Fleming, but it's not the lowest quality either. So it's a very nice built boat.
Well, and similar to some of the features that are popular about the main ships is, molded stairs. There's no ladders in this boat, and it is the full walk around master berth. So nobody's climbing over anybody in the middle of the night. The extra stateroom that's not the case, and that's okay, because we rarely have guests, and our guests are typically our 20-something-year-old children who are used to sleeping on floors and other places like that. So they're just happy to have a mattress. So, I think that is the story of how you found and acclimated yourself and Margot and subsequently me to the perch. So thank you for sharing the details. We appreciate the information.
It's my pleasure.
And to everyone who has watched and listened to this episode, we'll be back again next week with another episode of Great Loop Radio. Until then, safe cruising. Capable Cruising offers Taste of the Loop cruises. Scott and Karen are both training captains who will welcome you aboard their 40-foot motor yacht. With a mix of training and cruising fun, they strive to show you what the looper lifestyle is like. 4- and 5-day cruises are available in Fort Myers, Florida. For more information, go to www.capablecruising.com.